We're joined on INSEAD Knowledge by Caroline Watson, a social entrepreneur. You're founder director of an organisation called Hua Dan. You're based in Beijing. What basically does Hua Dan do? You're doing training, right?
We do. We have a very innovative training model whereby we use applied arts, particularly the arts of theatre, as a way to do participatory training with populations within China. This kind of model is gaining popularity around the world, and it's all about a participatory approach to development.
Your background is theatre, so you can see the obvious connection, but you graduated just in 2000, and you've moved to Beijing and you set up the organisation shortly afterwards. Why, or how did it come about?
Well, I visited Beijing. I was actually born in Hong Kong, but at the time that I was growing up in Beijing, in Hong Kong rather, people weren't really travelling in China at that time. This was sort of in the 80s, really, when still China was quite closed. So I visited China for the first time in 2001, and was particularly struck by the energy in Beijing. It's, for those people who've been, it's a very exciting and dynamic city, and I'm particularly interested in the issues of urban development, of rural to urban poverty alleviation. The issues to do with urban poverty as opposed to, say, rural poverty, different challenges within that dynamic. And when I got to Beijing, I decided to make a move there in 2003. I learned a lot more about the challenges of internal migration in China, the mass movement, I think unprecedented mass migration of the rural population into the cities, which has been caused by China's huge economic growth.
And why did you think there was a need for training via theatrical processes?
Well, when you talk a lot about needing to educate a population, China's education system is traditionally very top-down, as it is in many developing and even developed countries as well. And I think that if you're really going to engage people in society for a more equitable society, you have to give them skills to really understand what they're capable of within themselves, rather than continuing to sort of believe that education, knowledge and opportunities are purely held within the top echelons of society.
And so with this training that they get, it is basically to help them to get jobs, employment?
It's a number of things. We started off with women's empowerment projects. We've diversified quite significantly since then. But it was all about looking at soft skills development, human potential development. So we're talking about the development of confidence, teamwork, leadership, the ability to think in a more creative, innovative way, to take initiative. These are all skills that a truly sort of successful economy really needs to have within its population. But currently, China's education system is not adequately equipping people for the challenges of a new economy. I think that's going to be particularly obvious in the coming years, as we know with the economic crisis, the manufacturing sector is starting to create problems. As mass job loss is starting to happen in China. There needs to be a way to upskill these huge sector of Chinese population to be able to take a greater, more significant part in the knowledge economy we have.
There may be some people watching this who might find it rather odd that a foreigner's gone into China to do this sort of training.
Potentially. I think China is becoming a very, very open place, and particularly in Beijing. There's a huge, very international population. I think what was really important in the first couple of years that I was in Beijing, I really ran the project on a very small scale. I spent the time learning Chinese, doing an awful lot of listening to people, experimenting with the basic concept of what I was doing without sort of going immediately for sort of full funding and a business plan and everything. And I think I noticed that was often quite a big difference between a lot of people that came to China who did come sort of all guns blazing and ready to go. And I felt that there really needed to be that degree at which I spent the time understanding first. And I found that particularly in China, that relationship building is so important. And the longer that I have been in China, the more I feel that our work is respected now, because we have done our time of learning to understand the needs of the people at a very local level. And I generally find that sort of collaborative approach, that listening approach, has served us very well in gaining credibility for what we do.
Do you regard yourself as a social entrepreneur?
I don't think it really matters to a certain extent, what we're called. There's an awful lot of that word applied to many different people, and on some definitions I guess we fit and on some we don't. I believe what's really exciting is that we've now, we're creating more and more opportunities, or there are more and more convergence, I guess, between charity in the old sense and even business in the old sense as well, with growing needs to be able to match the social, environmental, economic bottom line. I also add a fourth to that one. I think it's very important that organizations are run democratically. I work a lot with a friend of mine in the States who pioneers organizational democracy, and I think it's very important that we're running our institutions, we're trying to make an impact in society. How we operate internally is extremely important to send that message out.
Are you trying to make a profit?
We would like the organisation to yes, make a profit and become sustainable. I think that's really important. For me also, like in terms of an empowerment model as well, if you stick to a more traditional idea of charity, you continue to be very dependent, if you like, on handouts. And whilst you're forming collaborative relationships with foundations and corporations, continuing to do that and finding ways where what your organization does is creating value in the marketplace, I see no reason why those two parts cannot exist side by side.
Primarily your funding comes from foundations?
Foundations and corporates, and then what we're doing is a growing consultancy side to what we do, working with senior management, middle management, and also bottom of the pyramid workers, which is our sort of core competency, if you like, in revenue generating activities. And in fact, INSEAD, the INSEAD